Hello, lovelies. How's it going?
Hi, Jason. I know this looks very suspect, but we're in a car park in Orkney, and it's absolutely wild outside. It's like the stereotypical storm, but we're okay. We're in good form. We're just waiting to get onto the ferry. What about yourselves?
We're grand. Hi, Neil. How are you?
Hi there. Yeah, great. Yeah, you can see about half of me there, can you? Just about.
Yeah, we can see you. This
Yeah,
is
I'm
so
fine,
great
yeah.
to have you here today.
Well, thank you. Cheers. Good to be on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is the adventures going so far?
Oh, it's been wonderful this last couple of days. The weather's awful now, but it started off beautiful, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was for filming. It was
We were blessed, yeah.
perfect, wasn't it? Yeah, we got so much done. We got it done so quick. Luckily, before
That's
the weather
wonderful.
changed.
So you're off to the next leg of the trip to do more filming, yeah?
Well, we're heading off now back north, back to Lancashire, where I live.
South
north of
from
England.
here.
South, you don't get much further north, could you?
Yeah, south.
Well, you've been Iceland. Yeah, I got that wrong. Yeah, you tell them a tourleader, can't you? I don't know the north from the
It's
south.
the weather.
but
Blame it on the weather.
Blame it on the weather. Yeah, that's what it is.
Blame it on the weather.
Yeah, we're heading home back now. Really, as soon as the ferry comes in, about
Gotcha.
midnight.
Okay. So you've wrapped. Well, this is exciting. Very excited to have both of you on here today, filming from your getaway car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, and I wanted to give our usual thanks to our monthly Patreon subscribers. Every contribution that you guys have made, especially the one that was made this last week, we really appreciate that. And also the Instagram page. If you haven't gotten an invitation from Timothy Thomas or myself, we're now on Instagram at beyond_room_313. Numbers 313. Go over and follow us on Instagram. We also have the Beyond Room 313 Facebook profile, which is mirroring the posts from Instagram. So if you haven't already subscribed and followed those pages, please go over and follow those once you're done with the video here.
And hold on to your butts tonight, boys, because this one's going to be a doozy. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. A painting of a crying boy was blamed for a series of fires in the 1980s. In the middle of the night in Thatcher-era England, a home in South Yorkshire succumbed to a fire. The lounge room was charred black, drapes and furniture reduced to ash. The owners of the home, Ron and Mary Hall, lost nearly everything to the blaze except one item, a painting of a crying boy. His eyes wide looking out from the wreckage, not even blackened by the smoke. This wasn't the first time a picture of a crying boy had been found amid the ashes of a torched home. On September 4th, 1985, British tabloid The Sun published Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy Picture. A story about a very unlucky painting that caused fires supported the comments of a local fire station officer. These paintings, the firefighter said, turned up mysteriously unscathed in fires across the UK, all of which started spontaneously. It was well known. He would never think of owning this cursed painting himself. The couple had laughed off warnings that their painting was cursed. Let all others heed the warning and get rid of their own giant paintings of crying children immediately. If the fact that paintings of crying kids were hung in the living rooms of multiple households makes you double take, you're not alone. The paintings, an odd relic of mass-printed art, were readily available in stores during the 1950s through the 70s, intended to appeal to young couples. While the paintings have not been reprinted for decades, their bizarre subject matter and backstory have kept the legend going, from copy-pasted internet legends to books of local lore. The legend of the crying boy painting seems to have begun with the Sun, fueled by the obscurity of the crying boy painting's artist. The artworks bear the prominent signature of one Giovanni Bragolin, but for quite some time, no one could find information about the man. Rumors abounded. He painted hundreds of crying children, many of them street urchins, it was said, in either Italy or Spain. Finally, a 2000 book of creepy stories called Haunted Liverpool claimed that in 1995, a well-respected schoolteacher called George Mallory discovered that the painter was actually a mysterious figure named Francois Savelle. The following backstory from 2000 seems to be a mashup of reportage from The Sun and Mallory. One of the urchins he painted was a boy named Don Monillo, who accidentally started a fire in which his parents died in Spain. From then on, wherever the boy went, a fire followed, prompting his nickname Diablo. Some believe the boy was adopted against the will of a priest and was abused by the painter. In the 1970s, the boy was consumed by fire as well in an explosion caused by a car accident. According to journalist Dr. David Clark, who researched the crying boy legend for Fortean Times and on his website, this legend has more than a few holes. Giovanni Bergoglio and Seville seem to have been one of the few pseudonyms for Spanish painter Bruno Amadeo, and Clark could not find evidence that George Mallory nor Don Bonilio ever existed. Amadeo likely painted 20 to 30 of these crying boys after training in Venice after World War II, prints of which were sold in department stores throughout the 70s. Another artist had a similar series of crying children paintings that were regarded as equally cursed. In The Martians Have Landed, Robert Bartholomew and Benjamin Radford reported that many people wrote to other newspapers in response to the Sun's coverage, including one woman who couldn't think of a reason such a lovely picture could suddenly be thought to be jinxed, yet wanted to toss it for safety's sake. Despite skeptics' responses to the public's distress via interviews and open letters, the story held. A post on the website of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry says that the Sun added salient details, such as that the urchin was mistreated by the painter, with the explanation that these fires could be the child's curse, his way of getting revenge. According to Clark, the Sun was competing for readers with the Daily Mirror when the opportunity to develop the story arose and the internet further grew the tale. Comedian and writer Stephen Punt also explored the legend on his radio show, Punt PI. He attempted to track down the homes involved and found Jane McCutcheon, who had hung the print in her living room in the late 1980s. McCutcheon, a mother of two, was cleaning her kitchen when she found that her handmade drapes, blinds, and curtains were suddenly ablaze. Her family escaped alive, but her home had been destroyed, except for a single painting hung in her living room, one of the crying boy. You could still see the little boy's face on the painting, she told Punt. Later, she heard a firefighter who saw the painting say, "Oh no, not another." After that was described as a series of coincidences and bad luck. McCutcheon speculated that the painting was the cause and prompted her to get rid of it. Most of the fires had normal causes, like cigarettes or unwieldy deep frying pans. Since most of the myth surrounds the nearly unbelievable fire resistance of the painting, Punt bought a crying boy picture of his own. After being inexplicably delayed on his destination several times, Punt began to feel a bit nervous about the possible curse. When he tested its fire retardancy by setting it alight with construction researcher Martin Shipp, they found that beyond the string it hung from, it didn't really burn. While the lapel of the boy's jacket was singed and the painting suffered a hole, the damage stopped pretty quickly. This may have been due to a fire retardant varnish, he and Shipp surmised, which would easily account for why the painting would remain little untouched and burned in homes across the UK. During his own investigation, Clark also discovered that the painting was printed on compress board, making it difficult to burn. Such explanations would not have sufficed in 1985. In the middle of the story's initial heyday, the Sun decided to take the legend further, requesting that the public send their crying boy paintings to them to be destroyed. According to the Sun's editor, the office got swamped in crying boy pictures, but the editor refused to display the paintings in the office himself. "Picture is a fire jinx," the paper reported. A week after its first article on the curse, the Sun published, "Crying Boy Curses Strikes Again." Though the painting under the headline was a completely different painting of a crying boy, the story was much the same, and an ordinary fire turned creepy when an unscathed crying boy painting was found hanging in the house. The legend of the crying boy survived into the internet age and even sparked fan clubs. If you search for this online today, you'll sadly find that the fan club has since dissolved. But evidence of its existence in 2002 is preserved on artist and coder Mario Klingerman's former blog, where there were discussions of crying boy painting sales and a Holland-based club. Klingman first got into the legend through the art of Laura Kikowaska, who replaced the crying boy's eyes with red LEDs, and for him, the painting's weirdness is the allure. The legend is a nice add-on. I think as a child, when we did holidays in Italy back in the 70s, I had also seen those pictures sold at some street booths, and I guess I found them quite peculiar. Klingerman has collected several of the paintings occasionally, fielding requests to sell or buy from enthusiasts. Despite his fascination with the story, Klingman maintains that he does not believe in the curse. Neil,
yeah.
Go ahead.
This is a very well-known urban legend over here. And I've been following this for years. And there's all kinds of theories, and some of them are much, much darker than the one that you just read. There was one theory that the paintings were made from some kind of fire retardant material that didn't burn. That was one theory of prose, like that was put forward as a skeptic thing. It's actually true. They have been found unburnt in many houses. Then there's some really dark occultic stuff around them. One of them is that they started appearing in Woolworth stores all across the UK in the week after abortion was legalized. That was another one, almost like a weird psychological, psychic, social thing. And the worst one of all is that the guy who painted those kids had kidnapped them, raped them, and murdered them, and that's how they're crying. And that's been going on for years, this story.
Yeah, I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, it's mostly here. But yeah, the cry. Now, he also painted pictures of women with large boobs and the same signature. And I remember seeing them in Woolworths when I was a kid. I remember seeing them, and they used to sell them in also furniture shops to be on the wall. They were prints in a shitty frame, but they were hugely popular. Now, I always think the real story is there. Who would want a painting of a crying baby, a child, in their house? To me, that was weird. It was a weird kind of normie thing, It is weird because it said in the article that it was really popular for young couples. That was like a desirable piece of artwork for them to have in their home. That is very strange. Now, it brings up all kinds of other things of it being a kind of an occultic thing. Right. If these kids were sacrificed, or even I'm quite intrigued by the abortion legalization story. Mm-hmm. But the more I think about these, I do wonder if we were dealing with some kind of black magic cult that used Woolworths or something. These things have happened before, that they've leaked. We see they've happened on the internet where do you remember there was a famous thing where some guy was getting people to hex Trump, and it turned out he was a dark occultist. He was using him for the charge to feed to himself. I often wondered if before the internet, is this how they generated big charges?
I would say so, yeah. Neil, do you recall seeing those around?
I think I might have seen the picture. I haven't heard of the myth, though. I just tend to... Yeah, I never come... Even though it seems to have started in the north of England, it's in Liverpool and Yorkshire. But I think I've seen it in Woolworths years ago, yeah. But I'm trying to think how you can have pictures that are sort of mass-produced that can cause the same effect. And how would that happen? It must be a...
Well, the charge would run through the whole thing. They all get printed off from the same press. Yeah.
See, they're prints, not paintings.
Yeah, I'm thinking. So you have something that's been mechanically made in a bulk amount.
Yeah.
If there was any sort of original hex, you think it would be on an actual material that was given to somebody rather than sold in a shop. I'm trying to think how.
Well, you could have a situation where that imagery actually triggers people to do things like a Manchurian kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
Set their own home on fire,
Right. Yeah. And wherever they were.
There's like a Pavlovian conditioning thing. They wake up at 3:30 in the morning and they set their house on fire.
So it's that particular image.
Yeah. That does something. Yeah.
The magic fed into it.
Yeah. But I remember, even as a little kid seeing them in Woolworths, I was like, that was weird. Who would want that on their wall?
Right.
But
that's depressing.
They were literally everywhere. I remember we were going to a cafe and one was on the wall.
Yeah, it's a strange thing to want to buy. Yeah. It's like a scene of sadness.
Yeah, and whoever was doing this, if that is what it was, wherever they were printing it from, they could have done something to that. However they printed back in the 70s, or what was it, the 50s through the 70s. It could have come straight off, the printer.
So they put something like a thought form into the actual image.
Yeah,
right. It just kind of goes to show you the power of art, like those of us who are artists, musicians, and creative types, your power does go into whatever you're creating, and whether it's used for malevolence or for your own for whatever purpose you're creating it, there's a tremendous amount of psychic charge that goes into that artwork, especially if you're magically inclined. So it's like I was going to say, this is similar to like when you have the master recording from that era would be done on tape, and then they would take that tape and reproduce it onto vinyl pressings, and then all the distributions of that vinyl would go out. That vinyl record would go out there, and it'd have the same charge that the master had on it. Regardless of where it was duplicated or how it was duplicated, that charge from the artwork of the music itself gets carried on. So same thing like what T was saying about the printing press. Like even if the people printing it didn't have an awareness of the thought form, that thought form could still be transferred through the charge of the artwork itself. Just like
very, very much like if a person who prints a record doesn't know what isn't putting the feeling into the music comes from the artist.
Exactly.
And that definitely carries on transfer to the person who's listening to it.
Right. Just like any hex, like the hex itself is usually done by the person that's the target mocking the thing up. They get the positive suggestion from the pathological occultist, and then they themselves as the victim end up mocking up the hex itself. The person on the other side of it issuing it doesn't do the work, but the person who it's issued to ends up, assembling it from the directions that are implanted from the kind of.
There's one thing. I have my own theory that I bring to this. This is my theory now. Well, it's not a theory; it's an observation. As an artist, the paintings don't look like they're lit from a light source, like a lamp or a natural. They're all the same. They all look like they've been lit by the glowing embers of a fire.
Right, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at it that way now.
You see the hot spot on his forehead? He's also sweating like he's near a fire.
Yeah.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
See? And the way it's lit up, it looks like that's the way a fire illuminates.
Yeah, he is.
Very intense tonal colors of pinks and reds.
Wow. So do you think if you had, as an artist, if you have whatever thought you've got in your head, can you transfer that into the art?
Oh, absolutely. I've done it. Yeah.
It's like, if you've ever listened to a piece of music and it does something to you, or if you've looked at a beautiful painting that made you cry, it's like that part of that's your own response to whatever you're seeing that is beautiful or moves you. But there's something that's in there too, that, you're probably having a sympathetic feeling of whatever that artist was going through when they wrote it or painted it or whatever they did, built it, sculpted it.
It sounds like that, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly.
So yes, it's all sympathetic.
Well, that's a very well known like emerging folklore story. Well, in Ireland anyway. But yeah, that is all the stuff you read out. That's all really true. It really did happen. But there's countless theories about it, and most of them are very dark. Do you want to know?
I think
that's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah,
I don't think.
Hold on.
No, yeah, the American audience, as far as I know, we've not really heard of this before.
Sorry about that. Hi.
Are you guys traveling to Aberdeen tonight?
We are, yes.
Perfect, that's fine. I've got vehicle checking open now, so if you just want to pull around in front of the window, I'll be able to check you in then.
Go and say hello to my friend.
Don't say hello.
Say hello, yeah.
Oh, hello.
Not me,
hello. We're live on Facebook right now.
We're live on TV.
Yeah, if you just want to come and check in, that'll be fine.
I'll do that thing. Cheers.
You could read the next story, Timmy, while we go around.
Yep.
All right, here we go. The past lives of children, incredible stories. As soon as they learn to speak, some children are able to tell remarkably detailed stories of people, places, and events in what might be their past lives. Have you lived before? Over 60% of the world's population believes in some form of reincarnation. From the logical point of view, when contemplating our existence from the metaphysical and philosophical aspect, the single life theory does not make much sense. The hit or miss theory of only one life in order to attain a heavenly goal appears absurd when one views the varying conditions of particular lives. There is no way to empirically prove reincarnation, however. What evidence we have comes from the testimony of people who claim to recall, sometimes vividly, people, places, things, and events from what they believe could be their past lives. The skeptical viewpoint is that these recollections are little more than flights of fancy and wishful thinking. More difficult to dismiss. perhaps, are such recollections from small children who, without prompting, describe their memories of former lives. Some as young as 2 and still in diapers blurt out, "I remember when I died before," or "My other mommy had curly hair," says the website's Children's Past Lives, based on the book by Carl Bowman. They often describe details that they had no way of learning in this life. Dr. Ian Stevenson, one of the foremost researchers into the past lives of children and author of Children Who Remember Past Lives, has documented over a 40-year period more than 2,600 cases that he says offer undeniable evidence for the truth of these memories. In a recently published book about Stevenson's work, Old Souls, Compelling Evidence from Children Who Remember Past Lives, author Thomas Schroeder writes, "These children supply names of towns and relatives, occupations and relationships, attitudes and emotions that, in hundreds of cases around the world, are unique to a single dead individual, often apparently unknown to their present families. But the fact is, the people the children remember did exist. The memories that the children claim can be checked against real lives and their alleged feats of identification verified or contradicted by a variety of witnesses. Here are some of those anecdotes from Stevenson's research and other sources. Civil War soldier. Carol Bowman was inspired to write Children's Past Lives by the vivid recollections of her own children. When investigating with a therapist why her 5-year-old son Chase was frightened by certain loud noises, the small boy described events that obviously did not occur in his lifetime. "I'm standing behind a rock. I'm carrying a long gun with a kind of sword at the end. I have dirty, ripped clothes, brown boots, and a belt. I'm hiding behind a rock, crouching on my knees and shooting at an enemy. I'm at the edge of a valley. The battle is going on all around me. I don't want to look, but I have to when I shoot. Smoke and flashes everywhere, and loud noises, yelling, screaming, and loud booms. I'm not sure who I'm shooting at. There's so much smoke, so much going on. I am scared. I shoot at anything that moves. I really don't want to be here and shoot at other people." Next one. Telltale birthmarks. Dr. Stevenson's research has often turned up verified correlations between birthmarks and traumatic events in the past lives of his young subjects. An Indian boy with an array of birthmarks on his chest recalled being killed by a shotgun blast to the chest. Another boy in India remembers a past life in which some of his fingers were cut off by a fodder chopping machine.
Neil in cabin 237 and Thomas in cabin 245. Okay. If you can just keep the boarding passes away from any mobile phones, you could deactivate the keys to the cabins. Vehicle pass, if I can get you to pop that into your dashboard, please. Okay. And there's a vehicle and safety notice if you can read over both of those at some point, please. Brilliant. Any signs or symptoms of COVID in the last 7 days from anybody?
No, nothing like that.
No? And you can just remember to wear your masks at all times in public areas, sanitize your hands throughout the vessel, and make sure you've got everything you're wanting to take on the card deck at the ready so you can vacate the card deck.
This is live TV, y'all. We're just going with it.
So there is a trailer in lane 1 at the moment. If I can just get you to pull in front, right at the very front of that, please.
Go in front to it and back up.
Yeah. If we just go right to the front of the lane, we do have someone that's just going to be moving the trailer.
Oh, okay, yeah. The trailer's going to come this way, isn't it?
It'll possibly just pull in at the side of your pool.
I'm going past it and then...
So just go past it on the left-hand side and then pull in front of it. So you're in lane 1. We're right at the front of lane 1.
Brilliant.
What's her name?
Thanks a lot.
What's her name?
What's your name?
Thank you.
Lovely.
See ya.
Cheers.
I'll wait.
She could shove her mask up her arse. Sorry, go ahead. They're still COVID mad up here.
They are, yeah. Not like England, Scotland. Oh, yeah, still.
Sorry. Yeah, you finished that story? You're still reading it?
Nope, still going.
I love this stuff.
Okay, still going. Another boy in India remembers a past life in which some of his fingers were cut off by a fodder chopping machine. This boy was born with mere stumps for fingers. Past life of a nun. Carol Bowman relates the story of a little girl named Elspeth, who before she was even 2 years old, spontaneously recalled becoming a nun. "I'm going to take my vows," she suddenly told her mother while bathing, in one of the first full sentences she had ever uttered. "I'm not Elspeth now, I'm Rose, but I'm going to be Sister Teresa Gregory." This small child even described some of her convent duties, including milking the goats, making cheese, and saying prayers. She even described her own death. The sewing sailor. In another anecdote from Bowman's book, 5-year-old Tommy Hibbert somehow knew how to sew a button back onto his pants. Tommy went and got a needle and a thread, threaded the needle and sewed that button on so expertly that I couldn't believe it. I had never taught him to sew, and he had never even seen me do it. Amazed, I asked him, "Where on earth did you learn to sew a button like this?" "Well, we used to do it on my ship all the time," he answered. "You were a sailor?" "Oh, yes." He then told me about how his ship would creak in the night while he was laying on his bunk in what he described as an old sailing ship with tall masts and many ropes. Tommy grew up and joined the Navy. Cannonballs. At the Children's Past Lives Forum, a mother tells of the many memories of her 3-year-old daughter who would say, "I want to go to my other home." Even after asking her, she couldn't explain it, just that her house wasn't her home. She also unexpectedly told her father that cannonballs go really far and killed me and my horse. Foreign language. My son, who is 15, had a very interesting experience last evening. He, myself, and my wife all fell asleep watching TV in our den. I worked third shift and set an alarm to awake me. I told my son to make sure I was awake so I could get ready for work. Well, the alarm went off and seemingly only awoke me. I called out to my son several times. He is a very deep sleeper, and when he awoke, it was a startling awakening. He sat up and started talking in a foreign tongue for several seconds. Nothing I recognized. He is in his 3rd year of Spanish, but this was not Spanish. After I called out to him, it seemed as if though he snapped out of it and awoke. His eyes were open the whole time, and he does not remember his speaking. So Escher, my son, has had several of these, and one that I always remember is he was maybe 2 or 3, so he still had like his little teeny tiny baby voice, and it was really cute. And he was a real big snuggler. He still is, and he would only fall asleep if I was holding him. And we were just kind of cuddling and watching TV, and he looked up at me and he held my face kind of like this, and he was like, "Mommy," well, he said, "My, you," how did he say it? "I love you so much more, and you're so much better than my last mommy." And I was like, "Well, tell me more about that." And he was like, "No, I don't want to." Okay. I left it at that.
Yeah, I mean, you could say a kid watched a war movie and learned about shooting there. But what about the languages? That's just, there's so much conclusive proof of this stuff now. And there's so many stories of kids saying this. And Christian parents used to get frightened when their kids said and told them, "Don't ever talk about that ever again."
Right. Yeah, and it's just that thing with past incarnation, like they're saying, the boy who was able to sew the button back onto his pants. The skills are what transfer through. Like we learn the things, and all of our behaviors and everything that we take that with us as a template, like what the alchemists talk about with condensing everything down. And so it's like you're born without memory, because memory, is a consideration of the mind, and the mind is a consideration of the body. So it's like when the body dies, the personality, the mind, memories, all of that go with the body. But it's like those doingnesses that we do, like being able to sew, being able to do ritual magic, and the things that all of us are into. You can guarantee that all of us have been doing this for more than one incarnation, because we all listened to Thomas, or we all listened to Neil a few years ago, and we're like, "Oh yeah, this guy's talking about something that we innately know." So it's like when there's a doingness, it's just it comes back. And I remember talking to my parents when I was at a really young age about things like that. And I'm sure, Mom and Dad, when you're watching this, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's just like, yeah, those they're not memories, but they're and I want to say, like, these instances always happen before the kid is about 5, somewhere between, they're younger than 5 or younger than 7 years old. Oh, that kid was 14. But I was going to say, typically it seems like these things go away, and maybe that's just because society and school and media, the programming of society kind of censors those things away with, and helps people self-censor them. But it seems like it's always really young kids, just like the kid who was talking about, being shot at and shooting at people, and things like Escher's story, about his other mother and things like that. It always comes through so strong when they're so little. Yeah,
there's an ethnic group in the Middle East called the Druze, D-R-U-Z-E, Z-E as you Americans say. And they actively practice reincarnation. They're the largest ethnic group in Israel, that non-Jewish ethnic group in Israel. And they used to be Muslims, and they became a kind of a different, I don't know what you call it, but they believe in reincarnation. And they actively go looking for their old families. And there's a documentary on YouTube that was made about 25 years ago. And it was about people who had been killed in the Lebanese Civil War in the early 80s, who would come back as kids in the 90s. And they were able to go find their families, told them where they live. And the Druze considered this not a traumatic thing or a nasty thing like that. They consider it a great blessing, a great affirmation of their spiritual tradition. And it was really quite remarkable, like the stories and the things. But what was very interesting is that they all regenerated as the sex they were in each life. So no man became a woman and no woman became a man. They came back as either little girls or little boys. I found that very interesting.
Are you aware? Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, I only heard half of it, but I was thinking about the idea of, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, if you're going to study something like an esoteric subject matter or whatever, whichever it is, you seem to get to a certain level where all of a sudden you get that feedback to say that I've already done this. Do you know what I mean? Like
a deja vu.
A deja vu I've already experienced, like a download to say that this has happened to me before. Yeah. And you seem to get back to that same level again. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, it sometimes it almost feels like, you have a day at school and then you go back to school the next day and you're like, oh, okay, I'm back in class again. But
exactly.
Transfer that over to life,
Yeah, exactly that thing. It's really strange. It's that you're like, it's like I've learned something new, but I already knew it.
Yep. You open that book to the same
I had a
page.
very strong childhood memory of being poor and working on the docks in London. And the first time I went to London when I was 18, I didn't have to even read the underground map. I knew how to get around through the tube system. Everywhere was familiar to me. I wasn't lost or anything. I knew my way around. So that kind of proved it to me.
I had a similar experience when I came to Ireland in 2019, when I was trying to, figuring out where we were going to stay and, where we were going to go and everything. I took all of the tourist stuff off the table. I just didn't really care to do any of that. And I just totally went through my intuitive feelings about it. And then, I ended up down outside Waterford in a place called Kilmacow, which Claire knows well, and met wonderful people there. And they were like, we feel like you belong here. Like you could just move right into this village. Like we feel like you have lived here your whole life. And so I did that, the DNA thing, which I know that there's a lot of reasons out there why people shouldn't do that, but I have my own reasons for doing it. But so I didn't get the results until I got back. And when I got the results back, a huge portion of my ancestry came from that very specific region. And while we were there, I almost knew exactly where I was, how to get around. I was oriented the right way. I never lost my sense of direction. And I've made lifelong friends from that little village there that I'll know forever.
What I find interesting is that a lot of the kids' recollections are trauma. It's like that was infused most in the actual recollection.
Because people get fears, don't they? Like irrational fears.
Yeah.
If anything like water.
I think it's because when there's a trauma, the emotions run so high. Yeah. There's really not very many other times in life when your emotions are going to run that high. And if that's when you exit, that's stamped on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, it's like it's not just with individuals. There are entire groups of people that have these imprints left upon their psyche. If a collection of people all went through that trauma together, those people, as they reincarnate, are going to experience that same trauma again once there's something in their environment that somewhat resembles that initial thing. Just like when any response to trauma, when you just see any little glimpse of what was there at the trauma, it just triggers that whole incident again on like a playback. Yeah, real triggers, not the triggers that the left uses, but like when something actually re-stimulates that memory within you, even if it's a past incarnation thing. And sometimes I wonder if that's what goes on with wars and things, where there's something that was that happened outside of present time, and something gets triggered about that, and people start kind of dramatizing an old incident. Yeah,
it hadn't been settled. The incident hadn't finished. They hadn't got to its natural conclusion.
Well, it's almost like that same thing that you're talking about, Neil, where you open that book right back up to that same page. It's like,
yeah. and now you've got to carry on that like you came here to do the next bit.
Yeah. You have to take it through to its conclusion.
And this is why I really like when, you look at initiatory orders and there's the first order, the second order, and the third order. So it's like after you go through like after you cross the abyss, it's like there aren't people in a single incarnation who become 8 equals 3s or Magister Templies. They don't, they get up to the 7 equals 4 thing. And then it's like, then they can come back and then kind of go to the summer school version of up through Adeptus Exemptus. And then you can become a Magister Templi. Then, you can cross, then you've effectively crossed the abyss. You can go up through those last 3 grades. So I'm sure there are schools out there where they can find these people, and they've got astral markers as a term that people have talked about. I'll let Timony take this one over.
That's what I was going to say. I'm sure you guys are aware of how they choose the next Dalai Lama. So
well, they say it's a reincarnation of the last one, but I'm not sure how they choose it now.
So they take the child, whoever they have several candidates, and then they eliminate them through the process of, they have things that belonged to the most recent Dalai Lama. So it's usually his teeth, his dorje, his sash, and there's a couple of other things. And they line them up, and they have almost identical replicas of each item. And then, whoever the actual reincarnated Dalai Lama is will pick the correct one that was his every single time. And so that's how, through process of elimination, they'll have within a village, because those villages aren't big, Tibet is a very small country. It's usually like 3. And so they take them through that process. And there's a really, really beautiful movie called Kundun that depicts this whole thing. So if you want to check that out, I highly recommend that movie. It'll show you that whole process.
And yeah, with that, I would imagine too, like I was starting to say, that someone who's, say, gone up through like the Adeptus Exemptus grade, and they have some sort of an astral marker that other people who are other adepts or other masters can perceive those things. Like, people always going around and assuming you're a Freemason or something because you're walking around with like this tag on you astrally. And it's like, people just see that. It's like, like the shining thing, like there's a shine that people have once they've gone through, even if in this incarnation, they haven't gone, through an official, initiatory order. People, they just light up that way. There's just like on the astral, there's just some like a little flag, like you can highlight a file on your computer. It's like there's something flagged as you as an individual. And then I would imagine probably you were talking, Thomas, about the Druze, and they before Islam was around, even there's mysticism and that part of the world where the Sufis and everything, which they're pre-Islamic, pre-Abrahamic traditions there. So it's like in those traditions, I would imagine reincarnation was a thing, and there were people that would go around and look for those markers, is what I'm saying. That I'm sure there might be orders like that go around and look for, but I'm sure just like everything else.
Yeah, the Druids in Ireland did that. There was a belief, well, all pagans believe in reincarnation, but there was something similar with the Druidry in Ireland, that this is why they kept. People think that the Druids in the Celtic world, their main thing was magic and prophecy. It wasn't. Their main thing was genealogies, and the purpose of the genealogies was to trace who people who had come back in families, in like noble Celtic families. Yeah.
So just changing it on a little bit, what about the idea of, in cannibalism, they say that you can transfer a dead person's personality and their abilities into the person that eats it, and then the same thing like with heart transplants. So I mean, does this thing stay with that particular person, or can it be interrupted by transplants? Or
I would say that that's still a consideration of the mind, and it's like the mind and the personality are temporary, where you have a mind, but you aren't your mind and you aren't your body. So it's kind of like those things I would imagine can affect someone's persona. Like if you get a blood transfusion, for instance, and you for a little while parts, or you get any kind of tissue, like if you have a serious burn and you get tissue donation. Anyway, you take somebody else's stuff on like that. I would imagine that it probably has something to do with consideration of the body and mind, but it would never go on past that incarnation unless you pick something up that you willingly deliberately do. Right. But it's just one of those things where, again, it's like has to be done deliberately. But it's something that I.
Did you hear people who have? Sorry, you can. I thought you finished.
Carry on.
Yeah, you hear things like somebody's had a heart transplant, and all of a sudden,
cellular memory.
They can play the piano where they couldn't before. But I see what you mean. It's sort of So because these things are out of the body anyway, aren't they? So it's
Yeah. Jason, what you were saying about the initiatory orders, I can tie these two subjects together. William Butler Yeats, when he was in the Golden Dawn, was very skeptical in the early days, but what changed his mind was he was introduced to a 13-year-old French girl who was uneducated and illiterate, who could speak 13 languages, including Irish, and she said she had learned them in a previous life, and that's actually what made Yeats commit himself to the Golden Dawn, because he'd had absolute proof of a spiritual life, a spiritual world.
Exactly, and he was able to go past that first order, and past the Stella Matutina. Yeah, and that's the thing.
It's actually Robert Ellman wrote a fantastic biography of Yeats, and describes Yeats, that experience he had, really, really well.
There was a doctor, wasn't there? So just slightly different.
No, finish it.
There was a doctor that studied Cathars, or people who thought they were Cathars, and they'd had sort of recollection, and he hypnotized them, didn't he? And they all had exactly the same, I can't remember his name, but they all had exactly the same story, as if they'd all come back in one great big group.
Like I saw, but the Cathars believed in reincarnation, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You see,
that
that's
was
the
a big
thing.
sleep for them.
Yeah, reincarnation is the default belief around the world. It's only in the Abrahamic world that they don't believe in it.
The Cathars were their main thing, was to do the consolamentum and not come back. They were in a break.
That was very Gnostic, though, because the prison planet thing. Yeah.
I love this topic of reincarnation. Timothy did a really excellent job finding these stories today, and I like the continuum that's going from that first story into this one. But
it's not going anywhere. It's going to keep coming back to story.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We're talking about it
just like reincarnation. Life. We come back.
People will still be wearing.
Yeah, my ex-wife and I were married in the previous life together. That's why I divorced her. This one, boom, boom.
Oh, wow.
That's too complicated for me.
Maybe she'll get you next time.
That's not true, by the way. It's a joke.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that's a really cool insight, but I think it's real interesting how you can see, we can perceive these things in other people. Like if you've done something with someone else in the past incarnation, it's like, oh no, there's just something about someone that shows up. Right. Or topics like you were saying, Neil, like.
And Timothy's story is very, very common. That people just think, oh, it's just a longing or a romance. No, it's real. You were there before.
It's real. I wish I would have written down every time he said those. I should have written them down, because I can't remember off the top of my head the others, but there's been many. But he still says profound shit, but the ones about past lives really kind of ended around when he was 4 or 5. But yeah, he used to talk about that stuff all the time, and he's very talented. He can just pick certain things up and just do it.
Did you ever have dreams that I remember when I was younger, I used to have a certain recurring dream. It was of a huge house, but I kind of knew my way around it, but it got a bit scary. And there was a massive lake outside, and I used to die in this big chair. And that sounds really weird, but I did, and I kept dying in that chair. And then I kind of thought one day, I wonder if that was
your life. Yeah,
that was a previous life, and I died in that chair in reality.
Yeah. Yeah, have you ever seen a chair that looked like it? Come across
if he does, I'm not going to sit in it.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
But it was a huge house. I thought,
yeah.
Yeah, I frequently travel on the train, and on the route there's this particular area that I pass through with these gentle rolling hills, and every time I go through there, I'm like, yeah, I died here last time. And the dream that I have about it, like you're saying, Neil, about a dream, I was probably maybe somewhere between 5 and 7 years old. And it was a dream, or at least a waking kind of hallucination or vision about that same area in a house. And just the bleakness that comes along with it. I can only describe it as just this bleakness, the loneliness of what death must feel like. But just when I pass through that particular part of the landscape, it's just like, fuck. it hits me every time I go through there.
You kind of know, don't you? You have a knowing
that
this is real, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.
Just curious, in the comment section, if anybody has any stories like this, please put them in the comment section. And if you're comfortable to share them, that would be awesome. Okay, I'm going to do the next one if you guys are ready.
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. Possessed by the Dead, bizarre Maria Tallarico story. In February of 1936, the body of a young man named Giuseppe Veraldi was found under the Catanzaro Bridge in Catanzaro, Italy. Giuseppe, or Pepe, had a large wound on his head, which police believed was caused by the impact of Pepe's head with the rocks on the shore beneath the bridge. His death was ruled a suicide, which was not a surprise. The bridge is often called Suicide Bridge due to the large number of people who have ended their lives by taking a final dive from the bridge. The puzzling question in the death of Pepe Veraldi was why. Pepe seemed to be doing very well in life, and no one could imagine why he would commit suicide. 3 years after Pepe's death, a 17-year-old girl named Maria Tallarico was walking under the Catanzaro Bridge when she suddenly collapsed. Maria was unconscious and carried to her home by friends. When Maria regained consciousness, something strange occurred. Maria's feminine voice had been replaced by the deep, gruff voice of a man, and Marie declared, "My name is Pepe." It's important to note that Maria had no knowledge of the death of Giuseppe Veraldi, nor did any of her family members. The first thing that Pepe said after declaring his identity was to ask that his mother be brought to the Tallarico home. One of the people in Maria's home went to try to locate her and began to question neighbors if they knew anything about Pepe or the whereabouts of his family. In the meantime, Maria, still speaking with Pepe's voice, asked for cigarettes, wine, and a deck of playing cards and called those at Maria's house by the names of his friends. Eventually, Pepe's mother was located and brought to the Tallarico home. As she entered the home, she was greeted by the sound of her dead son's voice, now playing cards with some of Maria's neighbors. Pepe saw his mother and told her that he did not, in fact, commit suicide. He had been murdered by a friend of his named Luigi Marchette, following an argument over a woman, along with 3 others. After delivering the message to his mother, Maria suddenly jumped from the chair and ran from the house. She was found unconscious back under the bridge where Pepe was murdered, and when she recovered, was back to normal. 9 years passed. Then the aging mother of Giuseppe Veraldi received a very unexpected letter in the mail. The correspondence was from Luigi Marchette, a good friend of Pepe's at the time of his death. In the letter, Marchette confessed to the murder of Pepe. Marchette, along with the 3 others, had killed Pepe following an argument over said woman. Pepe's mother reported the letter to local police, and the investigation of Giuseppe Veraldi's death was reopened. Luigi Marchette was living in Argentina when he sent the letter and could not be brought back to Italy to face murder charges. Of the 3 others involved in the murder, 1 was dead, the other 2 were tried in the Italian courts and convicted of the murder of Giuseppe Pepe Veraldi.
Incredible. Wow.
Well, there it is.
Just wow.
Yeah, nice thread again. We're carrying from the last story into this one. Like, you know, sometimes I would imagine when you exteriorize out of a body, once that body dies, most of the time people go and pick up a baby body. But if someone's got something going on, I would imagine the first warm body that's around, that's available, people can go and walk into that. You know, we talk about walk-ins all the time in the group and everything, but just that thing about people always have this weird idea, especially in the United States. I don't know if it's as bad over there in your guys' part of the world, but about ghosts and hauntings, where it's like, again, ghosts and all that are very much like a concept of like a living once and then going to an afterworld thing, but like an afterlife thing, but people don't take into consideration enough with hauntings that those are just disincarnate beings. You know, like we said earlier, with the parts of man being, you know, you got you, the being, then you got your mind and your body. And if you drop your mind and drop your body, there's still you there, and you can go pick up a new one. And even if that new one is, you know, someone that's an adult, or, you know, they can go in there, just like carjacking. Someone can go in like Grand Theft Auto style and just take over a car. but this again, just kind of going on with the reincarnation thing, reincarnating into somebody's body that's already there, at least temporarily walking in. And I think that's what happens a lot with walk-ins. It's not a permanent takeover, but someone comes in for a moment and then passes through. And, who knows what's going on with that. The person could be terribly confused from if this guy was just killed under that bridge, the Pepe guy, he could be terribly confused, angry, emotional, and all that. And the person who was there, he just immediately popped in and, it still hadn't dealt with the trauma, just like we were talking about in the last story. Like
he's pissed off too, because the truth of what happened to him is not out there. People are saying he committed suicide, and that would severely piss me off if I was murdered and everybody thought I killed myself. I would find every possible way I could to find some way to let people know, no, I did not do that.
And police departments not all over the world have on occasion hired mediums when all the leads have, fallen apart. And they've not often, but lots of times they brought through successful prosecutions based on the medium saying, "Was this person did it here?"
Yeah, that happens a lot over here too.
Yeah.
Very useful. Very useful.
That's the best story I've ever heard. I'm surprised that hasn't been made into a movie.
Right. Well,
yeah.
So maybe that's Neil, how about you? Do you have any of these types of feelings with past lives or anything like that? I mean, I know you had that dream, but
yeah, I mean, I've met people that have said they were walk-ins, but I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about some of the stories I've heard. But,
and that's good.
Well, that's because one of the reasons people don't take. One of the reasons that people stop taking reincarnation seriously in this part of the world is so many New Agers and hippies always saying they were Cleopatra or Mark Antony or this, always celebrities from history, Napoleons and all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's never the guy
who cleaned the sewers.
The local work builder or something like that.
Right. It would be more common people from your town or your village or wherever you were from, maybe the next one over. But yeah, it would be more just normal people who had things like what happened to this Giuseppe guy. They were wrongfully represented and then they're pissed off.
Well, that's one of the things that skeptics would always say. How come there are always famous people in the past? But that's not true. There's lots of people have reincarnation stories where they were not. The majority are not famous. They just pick on those ones to try and debunk it.
And I wonder if those are the ones that get deliberately put out there into the media so that
that's exactly
reincarnation gets debunked. Whether it's whether it's that one group of people that have taken over every single initiatory order on the planet, going around and putting this out in the media, where it's like, oh, reincarnation equals your Cleopatra or fucking whatever. So it's like that. Just people make that free association between reincarnation and you having to be someone tremendous like that. And I wasn't going to say the word just in case, but yeah, the Jesuits. But and then the idea too, when Timothy was talking about that with being wrongfully accused of how you died, I wonder too if it wasn't a full walk-in or if it just perhaps the impression of the incident itself could be hanging there, where an aspect of the man of Giuseppe was still in that area and hadn't moved on fully. So maybe he had fully reincarnated somewhere, but there's a part of him that hadn't been, if you want to use the term, reintegrated.
Yes, like a residual. Yeah, like a residual desire for justice, like Timothy said. A kind of like well, it could be kind of like an egregore in a way when you think about it, created by the fall at the moment of death. This kind of thing, and that became a kind of a living thought form of itself, and that's what the mother experienced. That's what walked into the mother.
Right. Yeah, and it maybe can even become somewhat of a tulpa, and not in this instance, but in other instances, maybe some tulpas or what's the term? Golems can be created out of these things. And
like an air golem, the bridge. Yeah. Now here's another one for you. Speaking of bridges, I saw a documentary years ago on the Golden Gate Bridge and the Fundament in San Francisco, and the numbers of suicides there were colossal. And they put a camera up, a good quality TV camera up, facing where people jumped, and it was the weirdest thing how people went off the bridge. They just casually walked off it, like there was no moment of like, oh God, you walked off it. And they interviewed some person, and she said that it felt like the bridge was calling me to do it. And she says that I'd often driven over the bridge, and the way the bridge sits in amongst the mist on either side of the bay with just the towers, the red tower sticking out of mist, it looks like a portal to another reality. And then she didn't say it out directly, but she said it's almost like the bridge itself is fed by the suicides.
Oh, right, the old energy thing.
Yeah. Like the bridge is a suicide golem. The actual bridge itself.
Yeah, just like the painting, just like the first story with the little boy crying, fires and everything. Yeah. And then it just makes me think too, Thomas, you've been talking in your videos lately about the 9/11 Stargate and things. I often wonder what kind of psychic imprint was left on that space and the people affected, not just the people who died, but I mean, we were all fucking affected by it somehow, but all the troops that enlisted in the military afterwards, everything. There's such a tremendous imprint left from that incident that, again, even if that was a harmonic of another previous incident, it's just that I would imagine, something was created by that.
Did you know when they were building the new building down there, they built it between where the two old ones used to be, and there was people reported howling banshee noises for months on end.
It's this whole idea of if there's been some real tragic event at some point, does that sort of make some scar on reality, and whether does that stay there?
Absolutely. And Thomas, what you're talking about with the howling and everything, what is that pool that they have? Is it the reflecting pool? And it's like you can't see the bottom of it. It's just have you been there since they put that there? It's huge, and it's right at the base of the Freedom Tower, the one that they built in between the old ones, and it's massive, and it's just this huge. It's like an inverse fountain, and it's just a huge fucking sinkhole with this water that flows down, but from nowhere that you can stand in any vantage point can you see the bottom of it. It's just this
the abyss.
Yeah. It's a fucking weird feeling. I went there a couple summers ago to visit my sister. She lives over there, and we went down there, and it's the feeling that I'm imagining with what you're talking about with the folks that walk off the bridge. Like, I mean, I didn't have any desire to walk into it, but it's this sucking feeling. Yeah, it's this sucking feeling. I can't. It's bizarre. You have to stand there.
The pool is like a collector of trauma, a scrying mirror. That sounds. What kind of idea was that for someone to come up with? That's bizarre.
It's fucking weird. You'll have to look up.
It has to be a cult. It has to be some occult order behind that.
Here, Jason's gonna try and pull up a picture of this fountain real quick because you have to see it. But yeah, no, it is one of the most hollow.
What was the experience like? Unsettling?
Oh, highly. I mean, just being there in general is very uncomfortable. But you can walk right up to the edge of this thing. Let's see.
And there's no barrier around it or anything.
I mean, there's a little bit of one, but I mean, you could easily get over it. Any of them, that one's fine. So yeah, it's got these different levels to it, and it's like well, here we're just gonna pull up a picture of it. Hold on. But yeah, extremely unsettling, and it just it feels like almost like a banshee call, Wait for it. There it is. The memorial pool. Yeah, whatever.
All right, there we go. Oh, strange.
Yeah, and it's just there's no bottom to it.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah,
that's genuine.
And it's just so interesting. Like y'all were saying this, like who would have the idea to create something like this? And it's like, I think Thomas, you're the one who said the story about when you were working that day, the colors people were using in graphic design were like reds and blacks and all these death colors, right? And there's like, was that your story?
What was happening was I worked for the company Marsh and McLennan, where all the people were killed in the first impact in their Dublin office. And we had to, I started on the day of 9/11, and we had to take over the following few weeks. The Dublin office took over the documents they're working on. And I've never seen corporate design standards that were black backgrounds with red and yellow and white text. And these people were working on these documents at the moment they were killed. They lost like 160 employees in the first crash. It was almost like they knew.
Right. So it was like the incident was being impressed upon them in real time, and it's like whoever the designers of this weird ass pool there, it's like they somehow intuitively knew to mock up so it's strange enough that they put the new tower between where the old ones fell. Like, us as occultists understand, symbolism of two towers and what's in the middle and between them, and the fact that there's this infinite void in between where the two towers fell. It's very strange that it.
So does
it's
that
just very
central square bit, is that like a really deep hole? Then is that just go down?
Yeah.
Wow.
So they have these plaques, and I don't remember exactly what the plaques say, but you can read them, and they basically just say, like, to symbolize that we're never going to be whole again, or what, some shit like that. But it's like, it feels like a forever harvesting machine, right? Like,
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really, really does. Yeah, that is spooky.
Yeah. Like
that's death cult shit. That is.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's just weird.
Yeah.
It's just
Cthulhu's feeding tube.
Into the abyss. Yeah. Right. God.
Yeah. Just right now, even I'm remembering that feeling. It's just a very hollow, empty, like, if somebody could tap your life force and just drain it. That's what it feels like standing there.
Nothing good and wholesome about that at all, is it?
And what she's saying there about something tapping life force like that, it's like, is that what was done? Is that the intention of what 9/11 was from a macro point of view? What was that what it was about? But yeah, those plaques say that, this created a bottomless pit for us, or I don't know. I'll find the fucking.
Yeah. Well, like if you think about the abyss, right? Well, it ruptured the timelines, and we're trying to get back to where we were before it. You think of the abyss as a place where there is no time, there's no space-time continuum, there's nothing in the abyss. It's where everything comes from. It's almost like the moment of that event is trapped within the darkness forever. And when you look into it, whatever force is in there, it's harvesting it.
Trying to remember
on a much, much, much smaller scale, we told you guys about this before, that active shooter situation that happened when we were at the store a couple months back, where it happened on aisle 14, and now they've removed aisle 14 and they've gone straight from 13 to 15. Well, they've created kind of the same thing there.
Yeah.
Where it's just this like endless time loop of like, it's trapped that memory within there, and that fucking place is just weird now. Even people who I know, I have tons of clients and people who they're just regular people, they're not into anything. They're just, normal ass fucking people. And even they have commented like, I can't even walk. If they go into the store, they avoid that part of the store altogether.
The psychic space has been disrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the act itself, it was brutally violent, and that in itself, caused a huge scar there. But then for them to go and do that, it just trapped it there.
And it makes me wonder if there are forces, or if there are entities or thought forms out there that deliberately do that take an incident and then create a vacuum right there by these mock-ups, like what Timothy was just talking about them removing aisle 14. If there's some force that goes in there and capitalizes on trauma, and that goes around and then creates these vacuums, trauma vacuums, as a feeding mechanism. Just like in nature, there's trapdoor spiders and all kinds of critters out there that use these kind of techniques. And you would imagine, we could imagine that we tend to think that we're kind of at the top of the food chain in the universe, but not people like us. We know that there are other things out there that feed off of us. And I would imagine that they could come in, we're talking about the abyss, Thomas, like something could come out of that abyss and make more of themselves. Like we were just watching The Dark Tower last night, and that thing, it's got a really weak story, but just that premise of it, the thing falling in the middle and then entities coming out of it and coming through into this reality. And I just wondered, with 9/11 and Thomas, you were talking about correcting the timelines. What came through when there's that slip, if that's when the Mandela effect really, or things like that really started to amplify too with the different timelines.
Yeah. My theory, it's only a theory, is just that these things like the Mandela effect are being caused by the timeline trying to correct itself.
When you have you got the two towers and you've got that sort of real deep pit in the middle. That makes me think of the the Kabbalistic tree and Darth, which takes you through to the other side, the dark side.
Right.
As if they've created the power, the energy between the two, and now you're moving into the dark part through Darth.
Right. Yeah, through Darth. Yeah.
Just kind of created that eternal pit right there. Just whoever's going to cross over that, if you're not aware, you're going in.
Yeah, keep away from that thing.
Yeah, Emmett made a really good comment. He said, we used to put dolmens over shit like that. Yep.
They used to do what?
Put dolmens. Yep.
Portal dolmens. Portal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, do you have a psychic weather prepared for us? Are you ready?
Yeah, I do. Even though I was busy on the road, I got up early in the morning to study it and late at night because I'm a company man, God damn it.
That's right. We're professionals, no matter what anybody tells you, no matter what we look like. And we look good.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Well, the week in psychic weather is a new one. I've never come across this phenomena before. And the way I would describe it is beware of the liar within. There seems to be a kind of a Luciferian expose happening at the moment that people who've been in denial have been called out on it. I've seen it so many times in the people I've been watching online, where I see someone talking about something and say, "Oh, you never said that's not true at all," and it happened. Or, I'm really happy where I am right now in my life. Is, well, you don't look it, you don't act it. So, and I was just thinking this is kind of weird, but it was almost like the person. It's almost like there's a kind of a classic Luciferian light being blasted on people to say, right now, just tell the truth to yourself, first of all. Don't be living in denial. Don't be hiding it up in a story. Don't be pretending everything is sunny when it's not. Don't be pretending you're something you aren't. Because right now, there's someone somewhere who will expose you. I counted about 18 or 19 instances of it, of watching people online. And it was all kinds of things, but generally it was the same thing. This person was trying to say something about themselves, like, I'm really like this, or this is really great right now, or this is okay right now. And then someone would say, what are you on about? And it's happened to me with some personal things, people I know as well. So there seems to be a strong psychic force at the moment to tell people you have to be straight with yourself first, because if you're not straight with yourself first, someone else will light a fire under your ass and do it for you in a very Luciferian manner. So the psychic weather this week is beware the liar within and do not deny who you are. Know thyself.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
That's what's up. That is a very tough predicament people find themselves in from time to time.
Yeah, I really can't say much more about it because I've never. This is a whole new thing for me too to see developing like this. And but wow, I'm also been thinking this is have some kind of reflection in the greater world and the lies we get and propaganda we get told. I don't know, but what I saw, like, it was really weird and it was like I was seeing it like on even someone I know, people I know personally were doing it to others. So what that means on the greater zeitgeist of things, I don't know. It's a brand new one for me, but it's bloody interesting.
Yeah, I think if we can just do that for ourselves, then we'll figure out what the greater, the macro is,
Yeah.
To see the micro first. Wow. Well, I'm glad that at whatever time you had to wake up in the morning to formulate that and bring that to us, I'm really glad you did that. Thank you. All right. Okay. Are you guys ready? This is the one you need your torches for.
Right.
This is the creepy one. Okay. So buckle up. And if there's kids in the room, you might want to kick them out. Okay. An encounter with the Hat Man. Rebecca was 6 years old in 1978 when something horrifying walked into her life. When I was a kid, I saw what I now know is called the Hat Man, Rebecca explained. The Hat Man I saw, he talked to me. She now every day lives in Florida. Rebecca grew up in Missouri and spent parts of 1977 and 1978 in her grandma's house in Independence, Missouri. During this time in my life, my mother, sister, and I lived with my grandparents off and on due to our own circumstances and the fact that my grandfather was in and out of the hospital, she said. Rebecca remembers other family members residing in her grandparents' house at that time, taking the spare bedroom she usually shared with her sister. That night, Rebecca and her sister slept in her grandmother's room and soon noticed that they weren't alone. My sister and grandma were sleeping in the bed like normal, and I was sleeping between the two of them with my head at the foot of the bed. I had a horrible nightmare, one where the dresser drawers were opening and closing on their own and ghosts and clothing were flying out. Rebecca remembers her dream self lying in the same place as her body slept. Most dreams are in other places or familiar places, but never from the perspective of where you are actually sleeping, she said. I woke up from the dream very scared. Frightened, she lightly kicked, trying to wake her grandmother, but couldn't rouse her. I debated getting up and finding my mom, but I would have had to walk past the dresser from my dream and decided that was too scary. I turned my look away from the dresser and up to the window behind the headboard of the bed, and that is where I saw the man. The man, a dark, looming figure, seemed to stand on the headboard, but Rebecca now wonders if the man stood behind the headboard and was extremely tall. The man was wearing a long, flowy coat, a top hat, and carried a cane. He had no real features, but was a solid object that blocked the light from the window behind him. I was terrified because there was someone else in the room and because I recognized it as non-human. Rebecca and the Hat Man stared at one another for what could have been minutes or seconds when the figure lifted its arm and pointed at her. He said, "This is your last chance." His voice did not fill the room. The best way I can describe it is that it filled my head. The voice was flat with no residual sound, as if everything surrounding the words had been removed. After the Hat Man spoke those 5 cryptic words, he put down his arm and disappeared. She told her family of the encounter the next day, but they paid little attention. Little kids are always filled with stories that grown-ups nod and smile while hearing. I vaguely remember being afraid of Grandma's room for a while, but not much else following the incident. She didn't bring up Hat Man encounter again until her teens. This time, her family listened. Everyone believed in ghosts, so it was another neat ghost story from a family member for everyone except my aunt. This is because her aunt has had more than one ghostly encounter, all eerily similar to her own. She said she had seen the same man in that same house. Although the fear of her grandmother's room had long since gone, along with the terror of that long ago moment when she met the Hat Man, one question remained. I've tried to figure out what "this is your last chance" meant. My grandfather died somewhere around this time, but I cannot be certain if the Hat Man appeared before or after his death. I do know that Grandpa was not in the house at the time, but he spent quite a bit of time in the hospital toward the end of his life. Was that Hat Man telling me this was my last chance to talk with him? I don't know, and I guess I never will.
Man, this one goes straight to. Go ahead, Thomas. You look like you're eager to say something.
I have to interrupt you on this one, Jason. Forgive me. Someone in the comments go to my Thomas Sheridan 2 channel, which used to be Open Source Occult TV, and Google the Hat Man. And now I'll tell you, they made a short video there you can watch later on it. I have a good theory about this one, and I like it. The Hat Man seems to have appeared in the mid to late 1950s. As an element, an archetype, as a spectre, right? There was a Portuguese company called Sandeman that make a port. They're still around today. And they went on a massive advertising campaign, and it was the Sandeman. And he was a black cloak figure as a shadow with a hat like that. You remember him, right?
Yeah, definitely.
He's still on the bottle to this day. Now, the advertising, the posters were all over the world, everywhere, of just that, the Hat Man in black. And you never saw his face. You only saw his eyes sometimes. And there was all kinds of things in bars, like decanters that you put on top of the Sandeman. It was the shape of the Sandeman. You poured the thing out through his hat. And then when TV came along, there was loads of like things. What is the mystery of the Sandeman? And it was always in black, right? He only appeared as a sort of an entity archetype after Sandeman Port went on that massive advertising campaign. Now, I'm not saying that they created that, but what it is that may have impinged itself on so many people's consciousness that they developed a telepathic thought form during moments of stress, that they became associated with the Hat Man or the Sandeman Port Man. You can pull, even if you pull up this, just type in Sandeman Port, you'll find his logo everywhere. That's where he began. And my theory is that the people were having, your mind will make up if an entity comes into your room, depending on your cultural makeup, you'll see it as what your culture is. But if you were raised in you're raised in the culture in television advertising, and they are quite spooky, these Sandeman advertisements from the 50s, and you're a child, that would enter your consciousness to eventually create a tulpa that actually came into real manifestation and exists as a spiritual representation of the Sandeman logo. Now that's my theory.
Yeah. So you've got like a collective, like we have collective, there's a free-floating anxiety, and then you can put that anxiety onto something.
You will anamorphize it or zoomorphize it as a monster or something. And that generation as kids probably began with the Sandeman Port thing that scared them. And in the same way, there's been clown specters and kids were frightened by clowns, like the McDonald's clowns. It could be like, but it doesn't mean that Sandeman has anything to do with it. It just means and then it came to be alive or real. And people who didn't even see the Sandeman Port that were seeing this thing because it actually became a thing.
So you would have some sort of a bad dream and an awful and sort of dark thoughts, and then you would attach that to that picture with that, what you already seen. It made you feel that way when you saw it.
And apparently Sandeman was founded by Scottish Freemasons who went to Portugal. Another one.
Yeah, this is the story that Timothy was reading, and this person seeing this shadowy figure in their room, it immediately reminded me of Rosemary Ellen Guiley's research into the shadow people and the jinn, and that this could be some sort of entity. And again, with the correspondence that you're making there, Thomas, about the Sandeman Port character and the Freemasons creating this, I was wondering if the people who created Sandeman Port had an experience with a shadowy figure like that, so they used it as their logo, the same way that people will use something that they perceive from a psychical experience as
apparently the Sandeman, whatever it is, winery or wherever it is in Porto, is supposed to be a very haunted place.
I've been there, yeah.
You've been there?
No,
it's a very ancient haunted place, yeah.
Right. So just like the other stories, pulling through that haunting, or whatever you want to call it, that entity through, just like the first story of through art, and this one through a spirit, interestingly enough, through a work of art and alcohol. Say again?
So they kind of they have the experience and then passed it on by busy producing it.
Right. So that egregore,
that's an egregore. It is a spiritual being, but it has cloaked itself in the Sandeman Port look, the Hat Man, because in the 1950s, kids were scared by seeing the ad on TV.
Yeah. There's a charge there to it, and so I do think
it scared me as a kid watching those ads on TV. It did, and when I was a little kid, that they ran all the way right through to the 80s, and it's still on sale, and you still see that poster now and again in new forms.
Yeah. And it's like there are so many places throughout modern folklore that talk about these kind of men in black types that wear the fedora hats or the tall hats, and always being connected with the jinn, always being connected with these entities who consider this realm theirs, and like to convince humans that this realm is theirs, and are somehow, I think, trying to reclaim it. And it's just it's just going through all these stories.
Well, what did Crowley say? In the past, they called them angels and demons. In the future, we'll call them something else.
Right.
They're the same thing.
So energy.
There's been this.
An energy.
I think that we speak about quite a lot, isn't it?
Neil, I'm curious. You said you went to that winery. What was your experience like there?
Well, it was with my ex's family. We yachted into there. We left the boat there, and then we went into into the town. It was
it's in Porto, isn't it?
In Porto, yeah. And it's obviously they're English families, aren't they? But it was
Scottish, I think.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, from
this part of the world.
Yeah. And it was just very, very old. You went into the dark cellar, and it felt cold. It wasn't particularly cold. It felt, like you'd entered into some sort of
crypt or
crypt. Yeah, that's.
I know people have been there and said they saw ghosts and stuff like that while on the official tour.
And it's you sit down there. They give you the port. You sit around the barrels, and you look round to the level because it's sunk on purpose. They have it in a certain place. So every now and then, every couple of years, it floods, and the water is supposed to seep into the barrels and add to the taste, which is really weird. And it's a very, very strange place. It's like subterranean, whilst not being. It was a spooky.
Yeah,
definitely a spooky place.
Neil, did I hear?
Google Sandman advertising and look at their history, and you can understand what. Like it was very enigmatic when we were growing up, wasn't it?
Definitely.
That logo, and it really, you'd be hard pressed to find a corporate brand that sunk into your consciousness like that did. It frightened me as a kid.
And it was. It carried on to the actual place.
Yeah.
I think probably what I'm saying is looking at that advert had the same feel when you were there.
Wow.
You know
do you remember
Yeah.
some of the ads, they used to just have the Sandman and you could see his eyes and nothing else. And that just was like a Mothman, Like, what a strange advertising
why
campaign.
Go down that route
to sell a port. It's a strange advertising campaign, and it's going to this day.
It's definitely got a leg, doesn't it? Yeah, it's carried on.
Did I hear you correctly say that water from the soil there drips into the barrels?
No. It's next to the river.
Yeah.
So they allow they know that the river is going to flood the whole of the cellar.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And all the barrels are then underneath the water.
Yeah.
And
so
this has happened, and they found it worked. So they thought, well, let's do that all the time,
Right. So there's got to be some kind of charge with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to drink as a mixed drink, Sandeman port and a shot of Sandeman port and a shot of Courvoisier brandy.
Oh, lovely.
Beautiful drink. It was a lovely winter drink if you had a cold. But when you drank it, you had an almost psychedelic experience. There was something very trippy about drinking the extra alcohol in the Sandeman.
Those two together.
Almost it's hallucinogenic almost. And a very pleasant buzz, a very, very pleasant buzz. And an absolutely delicious drink as well.
I'll tell you what is dangerous though. To stop the port from fermenting, when it's got to a certain level, they pour pure alcohol in. And that was where did the alcohol come from? It was part of the process, but you can actually get hold of that pure alcohol that they pour in.
That'd kill you.
It's not a trippy experience, I tell you.
Yeah, like it's like pot gin or something.
Yeah, they gave it to one or two of the guys. They just started singing. They were suddenly happy.
And you wonder about the water seeping. I know we're off on a different tangent here, but that's what the show is. No, but this is what the show is about. That the water seeping from the river into the barrels.
Right, that's where I was going. Yeah.
Well, what did Rabbi Loads make the golem from? The mud on the other side of the river.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Right. That's where I was going. And then if at one point there had been like a war or a battle where the corpses and blood and everything had, gone into that.
Porto itself is a very mystical city. That was the city where the newspaper reported that something was going to happen in Fatima a month or so before the apparition happened.
Yeah, that's what it was all that about.
Yeah, a mystical group took out a newspaper ad and said that an event would happen in Portugal that would change the country forever. And it will happen, it happened at Fatima. Yeah.
And there have been lots of sort of wars. This is before, wasn't it? Sort of
prophecies.
Wars of religious
prophecies,
things. Religious wars.
And also, and after that story about the jinn, Jason, Portugal was part of the Moorish Caliphate for 800 years.
That's what I was going to say.
And that's one of the theories about the Fatima apparition, that it was actually a jinn. And and Fatima was Muhammad's mother, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
That's even named after that. Yeah.
So it kind of always comes back to that. Whenever anybody sees any kind of apparition, or when they ever see something like that that's non-corporeal, it's most likely a jinn. It's most likely a trickster of some sort, trying to be, the entity on the other side of the Ouija board. Like in this story, they're saying, "Oh, maybe it was my grandfather." No, that thing will tell you anything.
Sort of elemental.
This is one of the things I was telling Neil. He didn't know about her. This is one of the things that makes Rosemary Ellen Guiley's loss such a tragedy. I wish she could be here on this show to talk about this now.
I really would love that. Yeah. Yeah. Her expertise in this subject. But yeah, I would just imagine though that like these entities, like when you get them on a spirit board, when you get them coming in a dream to someone, they'll tell you anything you want to hear so that attachment can be done. And, they'll tell somebody that, you're saying the Marian apparition kind of thing. They'll right. Yeah,
and the bottom line is this story is, aside from Sandeman Port, is an entity will use any shape it can to harvest energy. And if it's a successful shape in the 1950s, it will continue it to this day until down the road it finds something else.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Have you guys been picking up some of the strange sounds that we've been hearing on our end?
No, because we've got the heating on here.
And we've got a lot of wind.
We're the cat was shaking.
Rough crossing, I tell you.
We're gonna isolate some of those later, and we'll share them.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear that. Yeah, but that's part of our own workings our own chaos workings on this show. Which I'll tell you something else, guys. That circle, that drop behind you, with the graphic in the middle, with each passing week is becoming a sigil or something. More and more, no disrespect to Timony and Jason, you're both nice to look at, but I'm constantly more and more drawn towards that thing.
That was a sigil.
No, not that thing, not that one. The actual behind you, the circles on the wall, the sacred geometry, that thing, yeah. I think that's now becoming charged through the show.
Just gonna leave that alone.
Yeah, leave it alone. Let it build.
Yeah.
It'll probably be like, in future.
Uh-oh. Fuck. Well, I don't think our boys are coming back, so they're out there to sea right now. So we will be checking in with them periodically, just to report back to you guys. I did want to say one thing. I forgot to say it at the beginning. This is episode number 39. And if you flip that around, that's episode 93. And we are celebrating the third day of the writing of the Book of the Law. So everybody have a happy feast day for that. Get it out and read the fucking manual.
That's right.
Yeah. So, this was a great show. We had one last story for you guys, but it directly pertains to our friends over there and they are not here. So I don't feel it right to carry on without them. Perhaps we can pick this up next week, and maybe Neil and Thomas, I don't think will be together. So maybe we can pull Neil in for a Zoom and read this story, and they can talk about some of that stuff. But you guys are all great. Thank you so much for tuning in. We had an awesome time today. Having Neil on was great. It definitely added a new layer to the show, and it was very exciting. And he had some great things to say. And all of you guys putting your experiences and comments and likes and all that stuff over there. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And we will see you next week.